I don't know about you all, but I'm having a blast, man. These interviews have been absolutely off the charts. I love this topic of no problem parenting because as a mother, I wish this book was around when I was raising my kids because it would have been a fantastic book for me to read. Make sure that you go out and get your copy at actiontakerspublishing.com/NPP, which stands for No Problem Parenting. While you're there, we've got a lot of free gifts. And our next guest I'm going to bring up is Dinalynn Rosenbush. Dinalynn, welcome. So glad to have you here as part of No Problem Parenting. Looking forward to this interview. She does stuff with the brain, y'all. And I don't know much about the brain, but she does. And so we're going to dive right into the brain. So first of all, why don't you share with us just briefly, what your background is and how did you get into doing brain work? Is it brain science? Is that correct?
Well, yes, sort of. I am a speech language pathologist. And in order to be able to know how it is that we learn and how we can teach speech and language, you are connected to your cognition. You are connected to what it is that your brain is doing. And so, yes, all of my training did have a lot of brain science. And then we learn how it is that the child learns best and what it is that their brain does to learn and what derails them. And so, as a speech path, I take those strategies then now and teach parents.
I love this. And I'm curious, like this question came up in my head as you were talking there is like, how far off do you think we are in years, decades, centuries from us really listening to our kids?
I I think that is an issue that really has gone like throughout the ages. We all have had a hard time listening to our kids. And I think one of the reasons is because when we listen, we assume that they have the same motivations for what it is that they do that we would have if we had behaved that way. If we had said that, then I would be thinking this or feeling that. So they must be. And that is really far from the truth. Their brain is not developed. So we're putting so much more meaning behind why they do what they do because sometimes they're very reactionary.
This is good. This reminds me when my daughter was about 4 years old and we were at the grocery store and, I think we went to get like one or two things. And so we picked up our one or two things and I just looked at her and she was just this little kid, 4 years old with this beautiful long red hair all the way down to her knees practically. And she had really long, beautiful, I know a whole head of like this beautiful red hair. She was born with a whole head of hair. My mom actually braided her hair and she was born 4 weeks early, by the way. But my mom braided her hair when she was in the incubator at the hospital when she was born because she was so early. Anyway, back to the grocery store. So we're getting ready to leave. And I said, well, it's time for us to blow this popsicle stand. Because there's like a saying I used to say. And she looked around, she goes, and then she shrugged her shoulders and she went like this. She went, like literal, right? Very literal.
Right.
I was like, oh my gosh, she's literal. And so let's talk about that because that's a scenario that maybe, a lot of us parents might experience a somewhat similar kind of story where we kind of like, what are they, what's my kid thinking right now? Yeah, let's kind of like dive into that because that's an interesting thought that we're thinking as adults that we know what they're thinking because that's what we're thinking as adults, but we don't know what they're thinking as children. Did I get that right?
Yeah, you said it very complicated, but yes, that's right. So you gave a good example, like the kiddos that are so literal. Yes, our children come to us and they are literal. And then we don't remember sometimes that we have multiple meaning words all the way through the English language. So when we say things like you said, below the popsicle stand, how many different meanings are there for stand? How many different meanings are there for blow? We really do, if we stop and think about it,
you know what?
it takes some processing.
Let's not go into all the different meanings of the word blow.
Right,
okay?
We're not going to. No, we won't. But the idea that our children do have to stop and think, oh, what did they mean? And likewise, we would do well if we stop and think the same way they do, in the sense of, my child did that. I wonder what they might be thinking. And if we were to pause the way they have to pause to understand us, if we would pause to understand them, we would probably think differently. Because if a
Hmm.
child walks over to let's say the grocery store, and they just push a bunch of things off the shelf, well, if we get mad at them, we automatically are ascribing, if I did that, I would be trying to vandalize. I would be mean, rude, disobedient. Like we go down the list of all these things. But if you pause and ask your child, why'd you do that? You'll probably find out, like, oh, there was one that was almost off, and you were wondering if he pushed this one in the back, if it would make that one fall off, 'cause
Like a domino.
with dominoes and Legos, and that's all they thought. They didn't think about what happens after. They just saw
Mm.
the 2 cans and they thought, "I wonder if it'll fall." And they got their answer, but then all this stuff fell, and then they start thinking, "Uh-oh." But when they actually did it, they don't think that far ahead. So if we go saying, "You're naughty, you're bad," the things that we say, "You shouldn't break things." Well, there was no intent. Children often don't have an intent, but if we did it like that, we know a consequence of pushing something, so we would have intent. Children often don't have that kind of intent. So if we can pause and think, I wonder what they might have been thinking, we can often um, change our reaction to those bad behaviors, and we find out something totally different.
This is interesting because I know I've heard this saying, like people will say, like, what were you thinking?
Mhm.
And so if we stop to ask them, because a lot of
Well,
times for a child, well, correct me if I'm wrong on this, like a lot of times for a child, it's just wonderment, it's
ex-
curiosity,
yes, exactly. But if we put on, what were you thinking, versus,
right?
what were you thinking? I mean, that's different. It's the same words, but you hear it's different. And so if you can, as a parent, get into that mindset of wonder, like you're saying, wonderment, curiosity, go exploring with your child's brain what they were actually thinking. And we
Mm,
find out that it's a whole lot different than what we think they're thinking when we say, "What were you thinking?" Because there's shame in that. We're
yeah.
accusatory in that. Hmm.
Yeah, and that's interesting. Like you mentioned, the different meanings of the word, stand, the different meanings of the word blow, the different meanings of the word, maybe popsicle, maybe pop, or what have you.
Hmm.
And then as a child, they're trying to string together these words to make sense. And like we know it because we have developed, our brains have developed, some of us more than others.
And
But
we've had a lot of practice with those words, so we know.
right, right. And so that's fascinating. I love that. I wrote down teach intent. How do we teach our children learning the intent of their actions? Or at what age?
Well,
What age is a good age to kind of start teaching them the intention behind their actions?
I think you're looking at it a little bit backwards,
Okay, cool.
because I think what we're going to do is we need to teach them, like, the cause and effect. And then when we start talking about, oh, when you kicked Johnny, he started to cry because it hurt. And then we talk about hurt and we get understanding. We develop the whole concept of learning and understanding. Then later on, we can catch them before they're doing something. What do you think might happen if I knock down this tower of blocks? Because you know that they typically do. So you catch them before they do. How do you think somebody is going to feel if you do that? Or how will you feel if you do that? Or, like, having all these conversations. Then, after you build that part in them up, where they get awareness, they get a conscious sense of how their body affects space and time, then we can go into
Hmm.
intent. I think intent doesn't come until a little bit later, because they're not that aware.
Right. Oh, that's interesting. What came to mind, I don't know why, but that game Jenga, where
Yeah.
you push a block off, and it kind of made me think of that, how like we can utilize that maybe as a fun tool for them to learn,
Oh,
you know,
absolutely.
space.
Hmm.
Yeah. And as a
Yeah.
matter of fact, the name of your company is The Language of Play. And so I
Yeah.
would love for you to talk about that. It's like, what is the language of play, and what made you decide to come up with this company, and what do you guys do there?
Thank you. Yes, we very strongly believe that our language matters, that the language we use with our children as we're raising them matters. And if we're able to use the language that shows curiosity, that shows exploration, that shows that we are trying to really learn, really grow with our children, then that language is going to feed into them. Now, what I'm also calling play is the concept of curiosity. It is discovery. It is the exploration, experimentation, all of the things that mean I don't know all the answers and I'm figuring it out and I'm going to make mistakes along the way, and that's okay. Because that is development, isn't it? So when we use our language in a way that play is acceptable, good, right for all people at all ages, it really enhances that relationship. And we end up building stronger communication and stronger connection from the heart with our children. And connected children have fewer behaviors. Kids that can communicate have fewer behaviors, that behaviors that we don't like. They often stem out of a misunderstanding or frustration. And when we build in the language, like I'm talking about, the exploration and curiosity, it gives our children those same questions to ask us back. And then
Hmm.
they can get some of those answers, and they can communicate better on what it is that is frustrating them, because we will have talked about things with them all along the way. It's
Wow.
an expanding. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I love this. This is so good. Unfortunately, we don't have time left. Oh my gosh, time flies when you're having fun, right? I do want to talk about, you have a free gift. The free gift is
Yes.
a strategy called to understanding your child. So if
Yes.
you're listening right now and you're like, I'd like to learn how to understand my child. I'll share just
Mm-hmm.
briefly. When I was 5 years old, I ran away and I was gone an entire week. And you know what actually happened for and or to me when I was gone during that week is nobody came to get me. So I had a belief that was locked in tight. And that belief was that they didn't come to get me because they don't want me and they don't love me. Like, they don't want me around. They
Oof.
don't love me. That was my belief. And that was the belief that I operated on until I was 51 years old. And so if we could understand our children, if my mother was able to understand me more, and maybe if she had, your help, Dinalynn, to help through whatever that situation was, that things might have been different. But you know what? I wouldn't be the person I am today if I didn't go through that situation the way I went through it, right? So there's always
Well,
that.
yes, there are many, many things that we, you, me, everybody listening, that we understood through our little child brain and has come with us all of our life. And we never really stopped to think about it a second time. And that, your example, is a very big example, but it's true. On a smaller scale is your day to day. But when we learn how to communicate on those smaller scale day to days, we don't end up with the big, big example like you just gave. And I'm sorry that happened to you.
Yeah, thank you. It's just part of my life, part of my upbringing, and there's a whole story behind it, which we don't have time to go into today. So you guys are gonna have to tune in later to find out the rest of that story. But with your free gift, though, the strategy called to understanding your child, this is going to be able to help them. It's going to be 20 minutes, and hop on this
Mhm.
call to learn what you can from Dinalynn and see if this is something that you can utilize, for you to learn to understand your child a lot better, and then create a better relationship, because we don't have to repeat our past. We don't have to repeat what was in our life previously with our own families. With me, I chose a different lifestyle after I left my family, and I'm glad I did. But so tell us, like, what are they going to get by getting on this call with you?
Sure. So you come at me with a issue that's going on with your kiddo, and we will brainstorm together, and I can tell you some of the brain science that's typical, and then you will leave with a different understanding of your child, like our example today, maybe of your child's motive for doing what they did, or possible motives. And you'll realize that their brain doesn't operate the same way ours does, and you will have a clear understanding of some of those possibilities.
I love that. Awesome. So go to actiontakerspublishing.com/NPP. You'll see not only Dinalynn's gift, but you'll also see other gifts from other authors. Go check in on those and cash in. You want to definitely cash in on those amazing, amazing gifts. Connect with the authors here in the book.
Mhm.
Dinalynn is one of she's taking, an ad in the book, and we really appreciate you, Dinalynn, for being part of this and sharing your message and doing the work you do, because man, how powerful. I was just thinking about, my own childhood and my kids' childhood, how something like this could have helped me become a better parent, So
Yeah.
thank you so much for the work you do.
Yes, and thank you for doing this book too. It's fabulous. I was so pleased with that first book, and I thought maybe I could get into the second book too. And Jackie, bless her, she says, Dinalynn, come. But I didn't have the capacity. And I'm so glad though that you guys said, come on as an ad. And I love that. So maybe the next
Yes.
one I can actually have the brain space capacity to write. This book is so good and so helpful. I am
Yes,
really pleased that
definitely.
you're doing it.
Thank
Yeah.
you so much. And I'm honored and blessed, to have, Jackie and all the authors, in my life, because, the more I learn about, just the more I learn about parenting, even though my kids are grown up, I still have grandchildren, and I still have my children. They're still my children, ages 39 and 40, they're still my children. So honored to have you all in this book and being part of this message. Everybody, go to actiontakerspublishing.com/NPP. Again, wait, there we go. To get a copy of the book, get a Kindle version, get a print version, go get your free gifts, go get it all. Go get it all over there at actiontakerspublishing.com/NPP. And thank you so much, Dinalynn, for doing the work that you do to make this world a better place. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lynda.
You're welcome. Bye, everybody.